The clatter of plates and the hum of conversation filled the small diner on Maple Street. But Sarah Chen barely heard it anymore. After 6 years of serving coffee and scrambled eggs, the sounds had become a comforting white noise, a soundtrack to her simple, predictable life. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her worn sneakers squeaking against the checkered linoleum floor. The tips were modest, the work exhausting, but it was honest labor that paid her rent and put food on the table. She never imagined that one ordinary Tuesday morning would shatter everything she thought she knew about kindness, destiny, and the invisible. Threads that connect strangers across the vast emptiness of modern life. It started with the elderly man in the corner booth. Sarah noticed him immediately when he shuffled through the door. Not because he was particularly remarkable, but because of the lost expression clouding his weathered face. He wore an expensive wool coat that hung awkwardly on his thin frame, and his silver hair was neatly combed. Yet something about him seemed utterly displaced, like a photograph torn from its album. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the back of a chair, his pale blue eyes scanning the diner with childlike confusion. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you started with some coffee?" Sarah approached with her practiced smile, but it faltered when she saw the blank look he gave her. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down at his hands as if they might offer some answer to an unspoken question. I don't—" His voice cracked, and Sarah's heart clenched. She'd seen this before, her own. Grandmother had suffered from dementia in her final years. "That's okay, honey," she said gently, pulling out the chair for him. "How about I bring you some coffee and we'll figure it out together?" He nodded gratefully and sank into the seat. As Sarah turned to grab the coffee pot, she caught the eye of Marcus, the line cook, who shrugged. "They got all types in here, businessmen running late for meetings, construction workers fueling up before dawn shifts, elderly folks seeking company over bottomless cups of coffee. This man seemed different, though. Vulnerable. Alone. Sarah poured his coffee and returned with cream and sugar. "I'm Sarah. What's your name?" He stared at the steam rising from the cup. "Thomas," he said finally, the word seeming to surprise him. "Thomas, yes. It's nice to meet you, Thomas. Are you hungry? Our pancakes are really good." His face brightened slightly. "Pancakes? My son used to love pancakes." "Then pancakes it is," Sarah said warmly, jotting down the order even though she hadn't technically received it. Something told her this man needed care more than he needed menu options. The morning rush intensified, and Sarah juggled orders, refills, and the perpetual demands of hangry customers with diplomatic grace. But she kept glancing back at Thomas, who sat quietly working through his stack of pancakes with painstaking slowness, occasionally looking around as if trying to remember why he was there. When she brought him more coffee, she noticed his hands shaking worse than before. "Thomas, do you live nearby?" she asked carefully, sliding into the booth across from him during a brief lull. His brow furrowed deeply. There's a house with a garden. My wife planted roses, but she's—" His eyes filled with sudden tears. "I can't remember." Sarah reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. "It's okay. It's all okay." She should have been taking orders, filling ketchup bottles, clearing tables. Her manager, Dale, was already shooting her pointed looks from behind the register. But Sarah couldn't walk away. This man reminded her so much of her Nana, the same frightened confusion, the same desperate grasping for memories that dissolved like sugar in water. "Do you have a phone?" she asked. "Maybe we can call someone?" Thomas patted his pockets and produced a sleek smartphone that seemed almost comically advanced for his helpless expression. Sarah took it gently and found it locked. "Do you remember your passcode?" He shook his head miserably. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah sat with Thomas, keeping his coffee warm and his spirits up while she tried to figure out what to do. Call the police? They'd probably just take him to a hospital, process him like paperwork. She knew how that went. Cold efficiency instead of human warmth. Meanwhile, Thomas told her fragments of stories. A son who worked too much, a wife named Eleanor who made the best apple pie, a dog named Chester who died 20 years ago but felt present in his memory. The diner door chimed, and Sarah barely glanced up until Marcus whistled low under his breath. She turned to see a man in an immaculately tailored charcoal suit, striding toward the register, his face tight with barely controlled panic. He was young, maybe 40, with dark hair silvered at the temples, and the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. Behind him, two other men in dark suits scanned the diner like Secret Service agents. "I'm looking for an elderly man," the suited man said urgently to Dale. "Silver hair, gray coat. Has anyone seen—" His eyes landed on Thomas. The transformation was instant. Relief flooded his features, followed immediately by anguish so raw that Sarah felt it in her own chest. He rushed toward the booth, and Sarah instinctively stood, positioning herself protectively near Thomas, who looked up in confusion. "Dad," the man breathed, his voice breaking. "Dad, you scared me half to death." Thomas blinked slowly, studying the man's face. Do I know you?" The question landed like a physical blow. The man's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might break down entirely. Instead, he knelt beside the booth, bringing himself to eye level with his father. "It's William, Dad, your son. We've been looking everywhere for you." Recognition flickered across Thomas's face, uncertain and incomplete. "William? You were small. You climbed trees." "Yeah, Dad, I did." William's voice was thick with emotion. "You always worried I'd fall." Sarah remained standing there, unsure whether to give them privacy or stay close. William glanced up at her, really seeing her for the first time. His eyes, the same pale blue as Thomas's, held a question. "I'm Sarah. I've been sitting with your father. He came in about an hour ago." "An hour ago?" William stood, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus, we've had security teams searching 6 blocks. I was about to call the police." He wandered out of the house while his nurse was— "It doesn't matter." He pulled out his wallet. "Let me pay for whatever he ordered, and I really appreciate you." "He had pancakes and coffee," Sarah interrupted quietly. $6.50. William pulled out a $100 bill. "Keep the change. And thank you for—" "I don't want your money," Sarah said, more sharply than she intended. She immediately softened her tone. "I mean, yes, I need to charge you for the food, but I didn't sit with your father for a tip. I sat with him because he needed someone." Something shifted in William's expression. Surprise, maybe, or realization. He looked at her properly now, taking in her worn uniform, her tired eyes, the name tag pinned slightly crooked on her chest. "Sarah," he said slowly, "you stayed with him this whole time." "Of course I did." He was confused and scared. "I couldn't just— Nobody should be alone like that." Thomas, who'd been watching this exchange with faint interest, suddenly spoke up. "She's very kind. She reminds me of Eleanor." William's eyes went glossy. He looked away quickly, composing himself. "My mother," he explained. "She passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, and meant it. "After she died, Dad started showing signs of dementia. It's progressed rapidly. We have round-the-clock care. But sometimes he still—" William trailed off, looking at his father with helpless love. "He still tries to go find her. He forgets she's gone." Sarah felt tears prick her own eyes. She thought of her Nana wandering the nursing home hallways at night, calling for her long-dead husband. The cruelty of a mind that couldn't hold on to its own history. "He told me about Eleanor's apple pie," Sarah offered. "And a dog named Chester." William's smile was sad and genuine. Chester was a terrible dog. Chewed everything. Dad loved him anyway. He turned back to his father. "Come on, Dad, let's get you home." Thomas looked uncertain, but when William gently helped him to his feet, he didn't resist. Sarah walked with them toward the door, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment, this brief intersection of lives, about to end as quickly as it began. At the door, William paused. "Sarah, I need to thank you properly. What you did today— You don't owe me anything," she said firmly. "Take care of him. That's all that matters." William studied her face for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded, guided his father outside to a waiting black Mercedes, and drove away. Sarah returned to her shift, bussing tables and pouring coffee, trying to ignore the strange ache in her chest. Dale grumbled about her spending too much time on one customer, but she barely heard him. She kept thinking about Thomas's lost eyes, William's devastated relief, the way love and loss tangled themselves into impossible knots. 3 days later, a man in a suit, not William, but one of the men who'd been with him, walked into the diner during the lunch rush. He asked for Sarah by name. "Ms. Chen? I'm Robert Hendricks, Mr. Caldwell's assistant. Mr. Caldwell wanted me to deliver this personally." He handed her a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive. Sarah opened it with trembling fingers and found a letter in bold, masculine handwriting. "Dear Sarah, I haven't stopped thinking about what you did for my father. In a world where people walk past suffering every single day, you stopped. You sat with a confused old man, gave him your time, your care, your humanity, and you asked for nothing in return. I've spent the last 20 years building a technology company, making billions, convincing myself that success meant having the biggest office and the longest hours. I told myself I was securing my family's future. But when my mother got sick, I was in Singapore for a product launch. When she died, I was on a conference call. And now my father, the man who taught me everything, doesn't even remember my name most days. You gave him more genuine care in 1 hour than I've managed in months. That truth is devastating and clarifying. I've liquidated several assets to establish the Eleanor Caldwell Foundation, dedicated to dementia research and family caregiver support. I'd be honored if you'd agree to sit on the board. The stipend is $85,000 annually for quarterly meetings. But more importantly, I need people like you helping me remember what actually matters. Also, I've paid off your apartment building's mortgage. Your landlord will be informing all tenants shortly that rent is now $200 a month to cover only utilities and basic maintenance. Consider it a neighborhood investment in the people who make this city function. If you're willing to meet, my number is below. If not, I understand. But please know that you changed something in me that day. You reminded me that kindness isn't a transaction. It's what makes us human. Gratefully, William Caldwell. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking harder each time. She looked up at Robert, who smiled kindly. "He's serious about all of it," Robert said. "Mr. Caldwell has spent the last 3 days restructuring his priorities. He's stepping back from day-to-day operations to spend time with his father. And he meant what he said about the foundation. We need people who understand care on a human level, not just a theoretical one." Sarah couldn't speak. She thought about her 1-bedroom apartment, her student loans, her second job on weekends cleaning houses. She thought about how one act of basic decency, something that should have been ordinary, had somehow become extraordinary, enough to change someone's life. "I'm just a waitress," she finally whispered. "No," Robert said gently. "You're exactly the kind of person the world needs more of. And now you have the resources to prove it's possible." When William came to the diner himself 2 weeks later, this time with Thomas, who smiled when he saw Sarah and said, "The pancake lady," they sat in the same corner booth and talked for hours. About loss and memory, about what wealth meant and what it couldn't buy, about the simple, radical act of seeing another person's suffering and refusing to look away. Sarah accepted the position. The foundation flourished, helping thousands of families navigate the nightmare of dementia care. William restructured his entire life, working remotely to spend mornings with Thomas, reading him stories, looking through old photographs, building new memories even as the old ones faded. And every Tuesday morning, William brought Thomas to the diner for pancakes. Sometimes Thomas remembered Sarah's name. Sometimes he didn't. But he always smiled when she sat with them, and that was enough. Because kindness isn't about gratitude or recognition or reward. It's about the moment when you see someone struggling and you choose against efficiency, against convenience, against the modern impulse to look away, to simply be human with them. That choice, Sarah learned, changes everything, not just for the person you help, but for yourself, and sometimes, if you're lucky, for the entire world watching.